Hello and welcome back to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charley Man of Law Firm Alchemy and Red Kraken Creative, and I am so excited to have back on the show a friend of mine, someone who has been an excellent mentor and supporter, but is an incredibly accomplished entrepreneur with two amazing businesses, one of which recently in this last year struck up a partnership with the Washington Commanders, which he's sporting the swag right now. Fantastic. And hey, we're looking forward to another strong Jaden Daniels-led season. It's my friend Seth Price of Price Benowitz and BluShark Digital. Seth, great to have you here.
Great to be here wearing my $250,000 sweatshirt. It's like, so just to get this on the sweatshirt.
You know what? Sometimes the realization of a lifelong dream, cost doesn't matter.
Exactly.
All right, Seth, what's the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
Well, as you ask that question, and I love it, I almost want to throw it on its head. It's like, what do they teach you in law school? What they don't teach you in law school, right, is the fact that they may teach you the sausage making. That's how I think of it, right? They teach you how to process a case, how to answer an interrogatory, how to, what's admissible, what's not admissible, discovery. But what they don't tell you is how to bring in cases. Mm-hmm. Once a case is brought in, how do you sign it up? They don't teach you how to build and scale a team. And all three of those things, if you fail at any of those three things, it's going to be a very lonely existence, because if you don't bring in the cases, it doesn't matter how expert you are. Not that law school teaches you to be expert. It gives you the building block to then build and grow from there. It certainly doesn't think much about the interaction of getting somebody to say yes, that sales component. And finally, I think most challenging, which is, okay, you know how to do it, but how are you then going to create that team of people to execute on the sausage making so that you're not doing it yourself? And that itself, could have its own, its own university.
So one of the things very much related to that I loved is you had a LinkedIn post earlier this year, Seth, that talked about the dichotomy in the relationship between you and your founding partner, David Benowitz, and how you're very business oriented. He was I'm going to focus on the law. And related to that idea is like he handling legal operations, master of that. And you chose, I'm going to be the guy who brings in work. I would love to dig into that decision and how it relates to what you just talked about. So how did that come about?
I think it came about because of our personalities and who we are and what we wanted from life. I don't know if you saw other LinkedIn posts. This is a guy who was a fraternity brother. We were same year at Penn. We took the same year off. He became a public defender and worked with inner city clients. I went to Cravath in New York, the biggest, baddest corporate firm out there. And we ended up back at law school because he was in D.C. At a different law school. I was in the GW. There was movement on the wait list. I walked into the admissions office because Dave was on the wait list and basically said, hey, I got a buddy in town. He's ready to go. He's got a place, doesn't need financial aid. Can you take him? And 10 minutes later, he was admitted. And the rest is history. So we ended up both in the same section, the same writing section, the same 10-person writing section. And he wanted to be a public defender. That was his lifelong dream. He loved trial work. And so he got hundreds of trials and jury trials under his belt, to the point where, the substance for him wasn't a big deal. As we look at the personal injury world, a lot of people in that who went straight into that have barely ever had a jury trial. Mm-hmm. If they have, it's onesie, twosies versus, very, very comfortable in front of it. So we had, after the .com bubble burst, I was working in this company called uslaw.com. I get the entrepreneurial bug. He wanted to practice law. And we decided from that moment to divide and conquer, where he would essentially be the chief legal officer and I would do this. And I think that this point you raise of what worked well for us, I think is what I see a lot of people struggle with, whether through masterminds or their coaching programs, in that people want to elevate for two reasons. One, they want to build and grow. And second, when people get about 10, 15 years older than you are right now, they also want to slow down. And they're like, I don't want to schlep to court. And the problem is that first, the good news is that if you do it, good things will happen, but you can't be all things to all people. So if you're working on building the funnel, it's very hard to be working in the sausage making as well. And I think that that's where a lot of people, struggle, in that if you're one person, the good part about being a sole entrepreneur and not having a partner is that you get everything for yourself. But the bad thing is it's very hard to split the baby within you. And I think that that's where people struggle, where they want to build and grow, but if they're still responsible for casework, it's very hard to get the bandwidth needed for both the case generation on the marketing side as well as the scaling of the operation.
What I really like is the partnership relationship, because most of the firm owners that you and I meet in this space, it's usually a sole owner, and many of them really don't want to have a partner. And you made that decision early on. What informed making that decision? Were there any past experiences or principles?
Look, I didn't know any better. Not that it was the idea that it was an opportunity, I think, where I was like, hey, let's take a shot at this. And there are benefits, but I also know that I've seen people try to do partnerships where they don't know somebody particularly well. And many, many failed examples of things that have not gone well. With a friendship dating back to 1990, there are ups, there are downs, there's screaming, there's people have had good periods and bad periods, but somebody's not going to steal from you. There is something to fall back on, and that is very valuable. So you see a lot of situations where partnerships work very, very well, but many that they don't. And I guess when it is truly chocolate and peanut butter, it works awesome. It works less well when two people want to play in the same sandbox.
Right. Now, I think when you have such a success case like yours, there's wisdom to be taken and applied outside of hey, we have two partners in this relationship, and taking some of the best stuff that happened and looking at firms that have a sole owner where they may be struggling. How do I build up a legal department that can run autonomously from my involvement so I can focus on the business development? What do you think went really well in how you and David handled that could translate to other firms?
I mean, there are a few things. I think that one, I literally didn't focus on the case production part. I mean, that's a huge luxury, not to be understated. I mean, just in general, I have two masters at the moment with a marketing company and a law firm, much of it overlapping because it's both on the marketing side. But it is difficult, I think, when you are focused on casework, on clients calling, on getting out great legal production, and then managing a team of people doing it. It's hard to pivot into those other areas. And so for me, I think it was, you're looking like it was a master plan. We were like, hey, real estate's down. We have some debt to pay. Let's see if we can make a buck. We literally started this very, modest expectations. And it was just a good timing in that the work that I was doing on digital was coming to fruition where you could, and before we started, it wasn't that long ago, 20 years this year. One of the things that I remember was there were many firms that had scaled, but were generally crappy firms substantively. And there were boutique firms that were quite good, but hadn't scaled at all. Right. And the idea that you were trying to scale, something of higher level legal acumen hadn't existed in the market when we started. And that was one of the things. And look, it is the thing that I think Dave has struggled with is giving up control, which is if you're a great lawyer, and I see this all the time at BluShark. I have some guy who has no associates. I think he has one partner, no associates, and he's screaming about a piece of content. I'm like, look, the content is a means to an end. Yes, It can't be wrong legally, it can't be misspelled. But if you're going to focus, Dave, if I let Dave on my team, my partner, focus on content, he read everything sucks. If he wrote it sucks. Nothing is good. Anything he wrote, he'd rewrite. And so if I let him do this, we'd have three pages of content and maybe an associate, and that would have been our lot in life. So just like letting go and saying, hey, it's not all going to be Clarence Darrow written content. It's going to be marketing content that may make you cringe a little bit, just like the associates you have are not all going to be, Harvard Law Review. None of them are going to be. They're going to be people with warts, with issues, you're going to have people with substance abuse issues over time. You're going to have people with personality issues. And all of that goes into knowing that one of my mentors, Chad Dudley, says, he has a 50 lawyer shop in New Orleans, Dudley DeBosier, and he says, at any given time, somebody's fucking something up. And you know what? I'm okay with it. And it's not to say that he wants it, but it will get fixed. It is part of it. So if you want to be more than a solo, there are risks and issues that come along with it. I think that the better entrepreneurs who scale have checks and balances, have KPIs, have things in place to make sure that you build and grow smartly, but that it is jumping off the cliff. No different than what you're about to experience now, right? Your new venture, everything's great because you get Charley. But the moment there's somebody who's the coach or the salesperson, whatever, each of those things is going to, for a moment, a salesperson promises something you can't deliver. You're going to be like, oh, but you know what? You'll fix it. You'll figure it out, because otherwise you could never get beyond the Charley show.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And related to that, I've seen a lot of discussion recently, including in a shout out to Ryan McKean's Best Era Slack channel, which is a great place for everyone to check out. Some discussion about, hey, hiring associates. Should I hire the young, hungry associate? Should I hire the more experienced associate? I'm curious, as you all have grown, between those two models, is there one that you like more? Is there a right time for the right person?
Jay Ruane on the Law Firm Blueprint and I always go back and forth on this. Yeah. I built the firm generally with the 3rd to 8th year. This is outside of PI specifically, but I think it cuts both ways. I love that 3rd to 8th year where somebody knows what they're doing in theory, but they're not, so established in their career that you can build and grow with them. And that was my sweet spot. 5th year over under, but 3rd year would be great with a rock star. The sort of issue that comes is that if you want, you look at big law, right? They have their summer associate program. A Cravath brings in, back in the 80 people to get to 1 or 2 partners 8 years from then, if that's still an 8-year track, which I'm sure it's not anymore. So, I think that there is benefit to junior attorneys. The issue that I think every law firm deals with is, okay, by today's standards, a law clerk might be $25 an hour. Somebody graduating law school might get $60. You pass the bar, you're at $65. 9 months later, that person is probably worth $105 on the open market. And you're sitting there saying, well, I am at 65. I'll give them 75 and feel like a big shot, maybe 80. And they're like, hold my beer. This guy's offering me 90 to 110. And so it is a combination of things. It is not just you need to have training programs and SOPs and all of those things. I have an attorney who runs a pod, not in the personal injury space at my firm, who is an amazing generator, who has a lot of team members under them, but churns through attorneys because they just don't have a system in place to train, whether senior or junior, to fit into their model. And at some point you have to realize, unless you pay your dues and put the resources into a training program, or you're going to physically do it yourself in a smaller situation, it's going to be a revolving door. Or you do train them and you don't have an economic model in place in order to keep them trued up. Not that money's the only thing, but if you're $40,000 below market where student debt is where it's at, you're not going to retain people. So one of the things that I went to pretty quickly, and it's worked especially well in the criminal, family, trust and estate, in the non-PI space, I think it's much easier, is I love that 25-25-50 model, because what it does is that as somebody starts producing work, they're getting a minimum of 25 cents on the dollar, plus more if they bring in any work, God forbid, right? So the idea is you're going to be truing it up, and that way you're not losing a star who is making you money. Because a lot of people are like, oh, this person's making me great money. I'm making this up. They brought in $100,000 of their own work and they did $300,000, and I'm paying them $80,000. Well, that's a great deal for you, but by definition, you're below market. And so that it's making sure that you have an economic model that allows you to retain people, as well as the training program to get them trained up, as well as then a system to run it. Because as you build and grow, thing that we talk a lot about with Jay, is then you need managers and then mid-level managers to make all that work, which is a whole other thing, which they don't teach you in law school.
Which I'm so glad you brought that up, because in looking back on the episode that we recorded last year, it was around the time that you were talking about, hey, I'm really focused on bringing in middle management, bringing people up to middle management. So I would love to do a follow-up on that. How is that going? What effect have you seen so far?
Well, and look, it's a necessary piece, because the thing that I have noticed as you put together org charts. One of the things I love about EOS is seeing the org chart and doing that day one. So if you haven't done that for your organization, highly another thing they don't teach you in law school. Get an org chart, put it out there, and even if you're in 3 or 4 of the slots, or 5 or 6, that's fine. But start out to see if you want to grow, where are you and what do you need? And that way you can then have internal debates. You're saying junior versus mid-level attorney, or am I going to go with ops, or am I going to go with intake next? All of those questions. So as you're doing that and you're putting together that org chart, I think that one of the things that happens is you look at number of direct reports. And I think that when somebody gets beyond 8, and 8 may be pushing it in a true sense, there's a piece of fiction. And every time I see somebody with 10 direct reports, that means there are 2 or 3, and I say this word, I hope it's not bad, children, the 2 or 3 of your direct reports that are being ignored. Yeah. And I get that. I got 3. That means there's my middle guy, who's the lead, the easiest going kid. He gets ignored, and the troublemakers on the bookends are the ones that we focus on. And so, I feel that as we built and grown. So in the last year, what we have done as we've rolled out EOS, we have it solidly on the management team, is bringing organizational meetings to the management group, not just for coordination and issues like that, but for professional development, knowing that not everybody's made as a manager and you're trying to give them management training. Again, these are not people who went to law school, so they didn't even have a chance of learning it in law school. They certainly didn't learn it with their undergraduate degree. So now we're like, okay, here's a bunch of people we want you to manage. What are the best practices? How should you run your meetings? What expectations, what KPIs should you be putting in? All those things. So what we've spent the last year since probably we sat down last is empowering these people and trying to piece by piece add structure to those groups. And look, there's, I always say 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There are areas we've been very successful in, and some of those groups are intake group, runs as a self-contained group with a really excellent head of intake. On the other hand, getting certain, paralegal groupings, when we've gone beneath lawyers to paralegal pods, some of those have been more challenging because we are often left with people that have not had management experience or training. And there's always that truism, like you promote somebody because they're best at what they do. They may or may not. So you're weeding out, you can't, does this person want it? Have the capacity, all those questions we get from EOS. But once you have that, then if they have the capacity, then let's make sure that we have opportunity for them to build and grow and train so that they can do a better job at what they're doing.
And actually related to that, how much space do you think is wise generally for a business that's expanding like yours, is the size and scope of yours, to allow for some level of sort of freelancing within the system that you've developed? Because I hear a lot of opinions like, oh, just hire the person and let them do their thing. And then others say, oh, we've got to be exactly by the book. Where do you come down on that?
Like most things, Jay always says that I'm like an adult diaper. It depends. So, again, I think that neither of those extremes are, look, you send somebody out to do that. I think that's similar to the unlimited PTO concept. It sounds great, but it's fraught with peril. And at the other end, if something is so structured, I wish you could McDonaldize that point, but most of us are building. This is the piece that nobody talks to you about. Forget about law school. Nobody talks about to you on any of these things. As you build and grow, people are like KPIs, that's great. But it's very hard as you're creating the first of something to even have those KPIs ready to go. I wish there was a law firm in a box that we could just deliver to people and say, okay, now, and there's coaching programs and there are models, but there's very little of that. So you're figuring those things out. So, I think history is written by the victor. Occasionally you get somebody who comes in who's really, really good. And yes, you throw them to the wolves and they do it. But just as equally, if I go back to my history, take intake, when I had the wrong person in that seat, I gave them a lot of autonomy, and shockingly, it did not work well. There was a point where a guy who dressed well and was respectful and did stuff, and then we found out, our calls weren't being answered. So, it's, like one of those things. So it's not I think that, I can't believe I'm doing this, but quoting like a Ronald Reagan, trust but verify when dealing with the Russians, you want to give people autonomy and do things. But, if you do this long enough and you give 10 people autonomy, you're going to have a number of eggs laid, and it'd be better to know that sooner than later. So give rope, but, at your peril if it's too much, because you can really cause a big mess.
So obviously with the EOS thing, that comes with the purpose, mission, values, things that we've heard also people like Bill Biggs talking about for a long time as well. I mean, yourself, Jay, a lot of folks have been talking about this outside of just EOS in this space. Do you utilize those to help with that alignment? And if so, how do you use them?
It's funny because when it started out, I saw a lot of people using, firm values, core values as sort of a catchphrase. It felt very Michael Scott. You put
I agree.
A plaque on the board, and people, didn't mean anything. It was nonsense. I just saw at a very high level presentation, somebody trying to present on their core values, and somebody asked them when they were on stage what their core values were. They couldn't name their fourth. I mean, it was as cringeworthy as it gets.
It's very,
right?
What was his name? The governor, like Rick Scott or
someone. It was
someone.
a Rick Scott moment. It was literally, yes, that's exactly it. It was a Rick Scott moment. So I realized that, at the firm, I had a very fortunate. We came out of COVID and ended up with a director of operations who's awesome. And she did a great job of, we had sort of had 5 core values. We tried to put them into Price, right? First name of the firm. And we actually got into a controversy over one of them, right? Professionalism, respect. And she's like, okay, when you're hard driving, the moment that somebody sees that as non-respectful, we have issues. You're debating it. And she sat down and said, okay, of the core values that we were talking about, the ones that seemed to resonate most were passion, integrity, and excellence. That was for us. You can remember them. They come out to PI, passion, integrity, excellence. We celebrate Pi Day. We hire by them. We fire by them. It works for us. There are people and many other ones that are and it's sort of like EOS. We talked about EOS a few times here. Like, it's not magical. It's not even the best system out there. It's just relatively simple and works for us. And if it works for me, and may work for other people. And there's things like scaling up that are much more complicated and probably could do many more cool things with it. But, I was like, hey, we should be so lucky as we can get the simple version. And for us, passion, integrity, and excellence actually seems to have worked for us. People remember it. It is when we have an issue with an employee, we go through 3 simple things. Are they passionate? Is there integrity? Is there excellence? And for us, that has worked. So it's not, I think that whatever you can internalize, remember, and actually live by, God bless. And for those that find that, I think that it's the idea of, can you transcend from a plaque that looks good on a wall to something that is meaningful and can be internalized. There's a lawyer that I love in Florida who bangs on a drum, not my style, and bangs this into people. There are people that have, multiple C's or this or that, and it works for them. And if you're, whatever you can get your team to buy into is awesome, assuming it comports with what you want. But I think it is the actualization of those core values and not just a mantra or a sign.
It's one of the most important things. It's not, you don't win business by winning the business formation or business operating system game. It's how you use it, how often you use it. Does it actually influence your decision making? I think we've seen a turn in that, fortunately, over the last maybe 3 to 4 years in particular, where it's less about I'm victorious because I fit EOS perfectly as a model. And it's become a lot more about, I'm really utilizing this to the intention of it, not necessarily the letter of it.
Right. I mean, do whatever works for you. I mean, you see a lot of third-party companies now rolling out their versions of EOS. It's not, it is, look, before we did it, we just didn't have meetings. If we had been more, if we had, it is a random ordering of meetings. But if, like anything, like religion, why do you go to a service of any religion? There's an order to it. It's giving you a foundation and a place that everybody comes and follows a set of rules and operates with those together better than not talking to each other. How many law firms? I mean, I think that COVID and coming out of COVID with a hybrid work environment for most and with even more extreme for some, that people all of a sudden were like woke up and said, well, before we saw everybody every day. There was a culture, and Bill Biggs talks about this a lot, whether you identify it or not, it's there. I think the difference was post-COVID, people had to be more intentional because, it wasn't like your culture, had been, for us, we were a small firm. We'd go out for a happy hour after every big victory. We're young, pre-kids. All of a sudden, as the firm grew, there were kids. We didn't have those social touch points as much. If we wanted to build, and we had grown to the point where we didn't know everybody as well, and that we needed to put some stuff in place. Again, don't want to make it sound like this is easy or perfect, but I think being intentional about it and starting, like each step, taking another step towards adding different layers of intentionality, whether it be culture, organizational meetings, or whatever they are, those help build and grow depth and give the firm some more ability to scale than if you didn't do those things.
I mean, look, anytime that someone uses the word intention, I'm very happy. It's one of our core values at Law Firm Alchemy, actually.
What are the core values of Law Firm Alchemy?
So we have our heart values and our head values, and this is just what works for us. So the 3 heart values are love, courage, and loyalty. And then our head values are intention, learn, and action. And so those are what we use.
And just for anybody listening, we did not edit this. He did repeat them all. But that's it, right? Meaning that's not nothing. These are ones that will take as you build and scale, God willing. Like as people come on, it's going to take a bit to get them in. And given, maybe it's my dyslexia, but if I don't put some sort of order to it, if I don't have, at least you broke it into 2 camps, that's a start, right? But like until there's a way to pound it into somebody's head where it becomes part of their DNA, that then when it goes from the concepts to them believing it, that's, I think, where it takes off. And look, when you get, for us, we have our Pi Olympics where there's a, passion team, integrity team, excellence team. In fact, there was a debate at the last Pi Olympics where each team put somebody up, and it was amazing. You would think that it would be like, one of the great litigators at the firm that would, but we had some of the most junior staff be able to debate this and why is passion the best, or what, and we even got to the point where we are now at the end of the Pi Olympics, the winner gets to pick somebody who gets to throw pies at the executive team. And so that has become like a fan favorite within the team.
What I love about that is the embrace of, okay, we have the word pie now. How do we really make something of it? And having some fun with it.
Right. And as I see that, it is harder. And there are examples where if you make it too unwieldy, like I think it's one thing to be impacted. That was sort of a great example. What I thought was right wasn't what somebody who looked at it from 10,000 feet and said, hey, what's best for the team? What are we going to be able to scale? And so it's just like taking I wonder if at some point, rule of threes, you have your 6. At some point, will it be like, how do we get this so that we are, it doesn't make sense to focus it, or is your team so smart and dynamic that they can actually manage a multifaceted core value?
And, honestly, having it at 6, like to me, that was about the outer limit, frankly. And if it wasn't for the fact that they neatly divided into these 2 camps, which I just sort of discovered it as I was assembling them, and there were probably like 12, 15 that I wrote down, give or take. and you start axing them off the list. And I do like the EOS exercise, kill, keep, combine on several. They use it in several spaces.
And that's the piece, because until you have the team, it's going to be harder to see what's meaningful. And that's the piece that'll be fun to watch. Again, they don't teach you that in law school.
That's right. That's right. Seth, if people want to connect with you, learn more about you, the law firm BluShark Digital, which I'm really happy to say several members of law firm Alchemy I know either have signed or are in conversation with you all. Really delighted with that. Where should we send them to?
Look, I'm easy to find on social. Just Facebook, because I'm older. Less time on Instagram is probably somebody else responding, not me. So LinkedIn, Facebook, email Seth at BluShark. Any of these places. The opportunity to create the larger community, Charley, that you've helped to start is a pleasure, and the fact that there are people out there like yourself helping people take and actualize what is possible is great, and I can't wait to see what happens with this new venture for you.
I appreciate it. All right, Seth, one last little question for you. Really simple. What are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
Wow. So I have been doubling down on the buy back your time. Really enjoy that. I went through a phase with the unreasonable hospitality, and I've extracted a lot from it. I think it was great, but I've returned to buy back your time and sort of really been enjoying what the content Dan is putting out. I just came back from Australia from a speaking gig. And I may be late to the game, but I'm almost through with Yellowstone. That's what 40 hours on a flight will do. So really, really enjoy it. Can't wait to go to the precursors of Yellowstone. And listening, I'll tell you that I'm a kid who grew up with the 80s music and 70s and 80s music and loved it. But we threw a beginning of summer bash the other night, and a 90s band showed up, and they were freaking awesome. So right now, I'm all into the 90s music.
Is there a particular subsection like grunge rock, or
no? I'm not a grunge
alternative?
Person. This is sort of the continuation of what was classic rock before we got to pop, maybe.
Awesome. Well, Seth, thank you so much for sharing your insights, wisdom, tips, etc. I always appreciate a conversation with you.
Can't wait to get to meet up again in person.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.